What's the quickest you've noped out of a job? I worked in Claire's for one day. At the end of the shift, she asked me to put a bucket load of tiny earring packages back on the walls. A few hours later I finish, and apparently misplaced a few of them, so she threw all of them to the floor, and said, to do it again. Nope. Was told to work inside an industrial metal shredder that didn't have a safety lockout. Hell to the F nope. I'm imagining you being a temp at an office, and them showing you to your desk, which is in a shredder. When I was in the army, it was common for units to rotate through the post to help with cleaning. So, a group of my guys were sent to the recycling center to help there. One of them was shown to a dumpster full of phone books, this was back in '98, and an industrial shredder with the instructions of, put these in here. And the guy walked off. So, he starts tossing in the phone books. After a few hundred, one gets stuck and the machine shuts off. Guy figures it's a safety thing, so he grabs the end of the book to pull it out. That was just enough to clear the jam and the book gets sucked into the machine, along with 3 of his fingers. So, hospital for the Joe, and the center gets shut down for a safety investigation. Next day, inspectors show up and the guy there says, yeah, I trained him how to use the equipment and he violated the safety regulations. His fault, we aren't to blame here. Which was a lie. That whole place was out of regs and everyone was fired. My friend that lost his fingers, got a nice pension and medical out. I won't pay you to design that logo, but when my friends ask, who did it, I'll tell them, and you'll get more work, that way. Nope. Exposure, doesn't pay my bills. When I was 16, I had an interview at a local pizza place, in a not so good part of town. I was hired and as I was walking out, 2 guys came in and robbed the place. The manager gave them the money in the register, and they ran out. I looked at him, and he said, you get used to it. I never went back. Mine had to be when I was 18, and working at Blockbuster. I was helping the manager, during the before open shift, getting new items stocked on the shelves that came in that morning. My mom called me and told me that my dad was having a heart attack and she was panicking, while waiting for the ambulance. Why did she call me at work to tell me this? The Blockbuster I worked at was in a strip mall type area, behind my cul-de-sac. My house and the Blockbuster was separated by a small alley and a 3 minutes walk. I told my manager what was happening, and asked if I could leave to help my mom, while they waited for the ambulance. She said no. I just stood there, looking at her, thinking she couldn't be serious. I would be gone for all of 10 minutes and back, helping her if needed. She stressed how important it was to get the things done that needed to be done, and I could only leave if I called around to the other workers and found someone to come in and cover for me while I was gone. I took off my name tag, slammed it on the counter, and walked out. I never went back for any reason. For any who might wonder, my dad came out fine, was in the hospital for a few days. I was 22. Living in NYC, young and dumb, and got an interview for a so-called job in finance. I was invited for the interview to a big fancy hall in a midtown hotel. There had to be a couple hundred people there. Well, the lights dim, the projector goes on, and the guy starts talking about money and money management. Then a single human icon appears on the screen. Then 2, under the single one. Then 3, under those 2. Mother effer, it's a pyramid scheme. I walked right out. F Primerica, and they're hiding under the city umbrella logo. Edit, I had no idea, Reddit hated MLM so much. Thanks for sharing your stories. Ah. Primerica, I laughed when I went to that presentation. Only $200 to get started with all the licensing you can get for free if you do your homework. Saddest part was, there was a disabled woman there who said she had kids and just couldn't get by. Everyone in the room was moved by her story and the presenters said how this would be the perfect opportunity for her. She got screwed the hardest, probably. At the interview, they were late, no one knew where I was supposed to be, and as the interview went on, it became very clear that what was advertised as a programmer position was actually tech support. Similar one for me. What was advertised as something to do with surveying and statistics quickly turned out to be basically an even scummier version of door-to-door sales. I noped the F out of there right quick, and the interview guy wasn't the slightest bit surprised. It was a liquor store in a not-so-good part of town. Part of the orientation included advice on keeping the pervs away from the dirty magazines. If you don't, you'll find them jacking off back here. and how to use the shotgun by the register, when, not if, the store gets robbed. It's better, if they're not around, to tell their side of the story. Nope. Edit, it was a summer job, when I was home from college. It paid min wage, $4.25 per hour, I think. The rack where the porn mags were was visible from the counter, but the pervs would walk by the rack, grab one and head for the back corner, where they'd do their deed. I did not fire the shotgun as a part of the training, but I was, and still am, familiar with firearms. I once saw a Craigslist ad for a stereo salesman. I showed up to a warehouse, where a bunch of dudes got into a minivan. The owner told me to go on a run and see how it is and then talk about the job. Turns out, all these guys did was lie and con. They would go up to strangers and say, "Hey man, my cousin got this stereo, but he just got arrested and I don't need it. It's worth $500, but I'll gladly sell it for $200, then use pushy tactics to get people to go to the ATM and give them money. The system was a piece of shit, off-brand, and I overheard the owner saying, in bulk it only cost him $20 to buy. Yeah. I noped out of this pretty quickly. I also called the police. This was in 2010. I had a job in a salad plant, those bags of salad mix, a lot of restaurants use. I was there for 2 weeks, coring lettuce, in front of a conveyor belt, 8 hours a day, pick up a head, slam it, pull the core, put it down, next. You talk to your coworkers, or you plot the downfall of Western civilization. One really sweet lady had been there for 10 years. 10 years on the lettuce line. She got called into the office, and was gone for about half an hour. She said, "I won't be here tomorrow." I got promoted. I asked what she'd be doing. Cabbage. I didn't quit. I wished her well, dropped my shit and walked out. I feel bad about not quitting, but I was young and, well, 10 years. That was 28 years ago. Had I stayed, I might be up to carrots by now. I sometimes wonder how my life might be different had I stayed, and in those moments, I celebrate every decision I've ever made. Edit, when I say I didn't quit, I walked out. I didn't formally tell anyone I was leaving, and I provided no notice. I've never left any other job this way. Worked in a bakery, it was my first day, so I get there in the morning to meet everyone. Then they have me grease up baking trays, for the others to fill. I lift up the first tray, and like 10 to 15 cockroaches just scatter everywhere from under the tray. I tell the guy, showing me the work, that there were cockroaches, and he just shrugged. This was all in the back store, customers were about 10 feet away. So, I tell the guy that I'm not feeling too well, after about an hour of doing that, and I head to the bathroom. When I came out, I told him I couldn't do the job, and he told me to get a real job then, so I left and got myself a proper job. TLDR, cockroaches. Second day at Route 21, and the managers, plus other coworkers, all went out to lunch together, and left me alone in the store. I wasn't able to ring up people yet, and the store was packed. I just walked out. Wanted something part-time, when I was at uni. Applied for at the local cinema chain, and got an interview. It was one of those high turnover places, that meant, if you got an interview, there was a 95% chance you got a job. Guy on the box office radioed to his manager, and was told to take me to room 7. We got to room 7 and wait. And wait. And wait. About 25 minutes pass, before the manager starts screaming abuse over the radio, because we were not in room 2. So, off to room 2 we go, on the other side of the building, 15-screen cinema. The manager starts trying to turn on the charm, and I basically say, if that's how you treat your employees, in front of job candidate, there is no way I am ever working for you, and asked the other guy to show me out. I'm sure it made no difference to his behavior, but it saved me a lot of potential abuse. Cold calling people about injury claims. Have you been injured in the past 3 years? That kind of thing. The thing that really irked me was that all of the people I called, in those 20 minutes were polite, said they're not interested, and they were just sitting down for dinner. I realized it was a horrible job, and I was in no way cut out for it. I left after 20 minutes, and just walked out the door, without a word. Was 19, and started work at a Lube Pros oil change shop. Manager was a 24-year-old guy who, within the first hour of me working there, bragged about hanging around the trails, near a local high school, and beating up 14 and 15-year-olds, for their money and weed. He also said, that if I'm cleaning out a car and I find weed, or if I see pills, to take them and give it to him. He had a racket where he would steal illegal things from people's cars and threaten to call the cops if they didn't let him keep it. Left at the end of my shift, called the corporate number and quit, telling them everything this guy was doing. Drove by there the next morning, and a cop was questioning him. The place closed a few months later. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Never thought my first gilded comment would be about the 4 hours I worked at a now defunct oil change franchise almost 2 decades ago. My first day on a carpentry job, a 20-year-old kid, I was 22 at the time, shot me with a nail gun from about 20 feet away. He thought it was hilarious, and so did everyone else, including the company owner. Noped right the F out. It was listed as a marketing position. The guy doing the interview started showing me and the other candidate how sharp Cutco knives are. Turns out it was a pyramid scheme. Guy kept asking if I wanted to sign on to buy some knives to sell. The other candidate went to the bathroom and never returned. I felt really awkward, also needed to wait to be picked up, so I stayed for the whole thing. I work as a nanny. But when I first got into childcare, I was just babysitting. So, it was my first night babysitting for this one family. Things went well, changed some diapers, put the baby to sleep, and that was about it. Parents come home and are very drunk. They asked me to stay for a little while after they got back, which was weird. Then they offered me, a 16-year-old at the time, a drink. Feeling a little pressured, I took it, and just sipped on it. Then the mom got really close to me, and says, I probably shouldn't be driving home after having a drink. Once again, feeling a little pressured, I was thinking about accepting. So, I asked if I'd just be sleeping on the couch. I'll never forget her next words to me. She says, "Oh no honey. You'll be going to bed with us." I noped out of there so fast. I think I ran to my car, but it was kind of just a panicked blur. Left my purse there and everything. I remember going for a marketing job interview. The interview was, I had to get on a bus with a group of other people who worked there and go to this really scummy council estate, UK, and knock on people's doors and ask them if they wanted to donate to charities and things. It was really odd. I was following this guy around for around half an hour while he got doors slammed on him over and over. I mentioned, "Man, the pay must be great if this is what you have to do all day," and he then told me he wasn't paid a penny, it was purely commission based. Every person he signed up, he got like 50p. I just laughed and walked off. Edit. My top comment on Reddit is about a shitty job interview. Sorry to hear some of you have had similar situations. I hope you all are in better places now. I was interviewing for a contract position at a very small game development company, and they told me they were looking for someone to help finish up an existing project. Literally, the game looked like it was made in MS Paint. As if they had just hired some random guy off the street and asked them to make some art for them. Granted, it's a mobile game and sold for the standard 0.99, so maybe that's not the worst, but the game itself doesn't look engaging at all either. But I figure, worst comes to worst, I could make some money on the side with some low effort work. Then they told me that my pay would be a percentage of the sales. Noped right out of that one. I went into an office for an interview. They said they had several positions available, and I wanted to do some admin stuff. After the interview they told me to get in a van to do the next part of the process. Turns out we drove an hour away, so I could shadow one of their door-to-door salespeople. They would ask residents to go into their basement to check their hot water heaters to see if they were eligible to replace them with their company's own. I felt pretty uncomfortable about this, and pretty pissed. My whole day was gone doing this. The worst part was the girl I was shadowing spent half the day sitting around in the truck reading magazines and waiting for people to come home from work. I was sort of asking questions about the job, and she got defensive and said, "Well, I decide if you get this job or not," to which I replied, "Yeah, I don't know if I want to do this." But she kept insisting that it was her who decided if I worked. Don't think she understood I meant that I didn't want to do this shit. Effing waste of a day. Back in the 90s, I worked at a fast food restaurant to supplement my military income. I'll just say, it was associated with a king. Lasted all of 30 minutes. During that time, I witnessed an employee puke into the sink, used for washing utensils, without cleaning it out, before it was used again. Then another employee dropped a cooked chicken patty on the nasty-ass floor, picked it up, and put it on a bun to be served. At that point, I just walked out the door never to return. Never ate at another fast food place again as a result. I guess in a way, something good came of it. Edit, the educated guesses, as to which king I may be referring, have made my day. This is why I love this place. Thanks for the laughs. It was a shop that refurbished train suspension hydraulics. 40% of the guys were missing at least part of a finger. Maintenance guy was missing 4 on one hand, and 1.5 on another. Half the guys were high, and the guy training me stormed out halfway through the second day. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to dip out now. Back in college, I used to work part-time as a nanny. One summer, I landed a really sweet-sounding 40-hour/week, Monday to Friday, nannying job, looking after a baby and toddler. I was super excited about all the money I was going to make, working that many hours, but the weird thing about this job was that the unemployed dad was also going to be at home with me. He was supposed to be spending all his time looking for a job, and I was watching after the kids, while the wife was at work. Literally that first week, on day 2 or 3, he starts hinting about his marriage problems and how his wife sleeps on the couch. The next day, he asks me to try out his fancy new massage chair. I reluctantly agreed, and he just stared at me while I laid on this vibrating chair, and was like, "Oh yeah, nice, great, thanks." He then offered to give me an actual massage sometime, and maybe I wouldn't mind giving him one too? On Friday afternoon I went home, told my parents, who I was living with for the summer, everything, and my mom called the guy and told him I wasn't coming back the following Monday or ever. He then sent me a text, saying he was disappointed in me. Ugh. And his poor wife. Worked at Target for 2 days. On my first day, a co-worker warned me another co-worker may stab me if I got too close to him or walked behind him. Our job was restocking product on narrow shelves in cramped aisles. Left to work at a casino, which was considerably safer. Was looking for a sporadic part-time job. Applied at this little catering company that had been around for a while. Showed up for the interview, and realized that a rich guy had bought it 2 weeks earlier for his wife to have a hobby. They fired everyone, and hired friends' kids to help out. I was literally the only one with cooking or hospitality experience. They get me to help out for a few hours to see if they like me. We get along, and there are a couple red flags, but the pay is about 50% higher than the going rate. We agree to meet on the Sunday to finish up prep for the week and get everything sorted for my role. Show up 15 minutes early and nobody is there. I waited 30 minutes and said, F it, since I literally just started incident and have her number, but she had mine. She calls the next day at 8 a.m., demanding I don't go to my regular job, and get in there to help her out, since she waited an hour for me. I told her I was there at 2 and waited. She then explodes saying that she owns the business and was with her husband at brunch, so it would have been rude to step out to call me. Then she goes full Amy's Baking Company on me. Goes off on how she fired everyone because these cooks think they knew better than her, but she goes out and eats all the time, how she knows more about restaurants than anyone in the city, and how as a grateful employee, I should have sat and waited for her to finish her very important brunch. I ended up hanging upon her. They were closed within 3 more weeks. Seems she knew so much about restaurants, she forgot that to own a food service business, you need a food handling certificate, and at least one person with certification. 3 days after my 2-week training, I was supposed to be a seasonal temp worker for a national propane company. The job distribution and training consisted of taking calls, off hours, for people who wanted refills and acting as a messenger service, referring their contact info their local store when they open the next day. Easy peasy. When I got out onto the floor, I found I was actually expected to be a dispatcher for drivers and also first point of contact for all emergency situations. Things I had never been so much as briefed on in training. My first shift, I had to field a call from a local police officer who was on site to a horrific propane truck crash. I got to wake the guy's district manager in the dead of night, tell him his worker was dead, and the overturned truck was blocking a few lanes of the freeway, and the police were trying to get a hold of him. That was just the start. A customer got the smell of garlic and eggs in the house. I got the call. What do I do next, Miss Dispatcher? F if I know. Get out of the house ASAP, CO detector is going off. I got the call. instead of 911, for some reason. I had zero interest in being underpaid, not trained emergency dispatcher. It's the only job I took off on, without giving a 2-week notice. I was nice enough to finish out my shift on the 3rd day, but that was it. Many years ago, I worked at a popular sports bar as a line cook. First day, they had me train with a guy who didn't speak English for 2 hours. Not a huge deal. Mostly you observe people in a kitchen, and that's how you learn. Owner came back and said she was scheduling me to be alone the next day, which was Super Bowl Sunday. Noped out of there so fast. Left, right, then, and there. I went to my orientation at a boot factory. They're government contracted, and so pay minimum wage, so I figured I'd work there a while and look for something better. After we do the usual paperwork signing and such, we're taken, as a group, onto the factory floor for a tour. It's hot, it's crowded, it stinks, and everyone working looks annoyed by our presence. Okay, I guess not everyone loves their job, right? No biggie, I'm sure this won't be so bad. Then our guide informs us, in no uncertain terms, that our coworkers, quite often, give new people bad information to get them in trouble or make them mess up. They'd even be the ones to rat you out. Then we're told that our foreman is the type to yell, for no reason, ask people if they're drunk in an accusatory way, for no reason, and is generally a giant a-hole. I took a few moments to think after these last revelations, said, nah, and walked out of the building without a word to anyone. F that shit, Captain. I'm not putting up with all of that, for $8 and some change an hour. Got a job at a factory that made cardboard cutouts, or the cardboard for cutouts. It was a first shift job, had to be up at 4 a.m. and was off by 4 p.m. The guy that I was paired with, to show me the ropes, was this hillbilly dude, who just talked about eating the boss's daughter's ass all day, and what he did to his wife's ass. Was only there a day and a half, I left at lunch break, of the second day. Was hired as an intern manager, for a local non-profit recycling plant. This meant I would hire and train interns for this amazing work opportunity. Turns out, for them, interns meant working for free, doing basically everything for the organization event and marketing-wise, while also cleaning the bathroom and taking out trash for the whole place every week. That's actually super illegal, for being way too close for slave labor. I was on contract for minimum 6 months, but I managed to get out of it after 2. I ain't risking my career for their shady business practices. Edit. While yes, it is legal for non-profits to have unpaid interns and give them a level of responsibility, this place had no marketing or event planning staff, and relied on interns to be able to do the jobs and have the quality of a professional. Besides, always being hounded by the CEO that the interns, who had no experience or training, wasn't producing the same quality of work. Someone who's been in the industry for at least a few years, this does enter a gray area, where even a full non-profit may be protected.